Hello, I'm Mike Ryan. I'm the Chief Networking Officer at PIMS, and welcome to our second season of Minutes with Mike. Now in my 33rd year at PIMS, I've had the privilege of partnering with companies both large and small, supporting their PR and marketing through customized fulfillment and distribution that delivers measurable impact on their brand perception, boosts positive affinity, and fuels their overall brand performance. And throughout my career, I've had the chance to work alongside many talented folks. This is their story. On this show, we'll sit down with some of the world's top marketing and business thought leaders to learn more about their success, how they got there, how marketing helped them achieve their goals, what strategies they used, and what inspires them. Please join me on this journey as we learn from those who are changing the way we think about business. So sit back, enjoy. You're listening to Minutes with Mike. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Minutes with Mike. My wonderful guest today is Matt Wurst. I'm very excited. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It is wonderful to be with you for as many minutes as you're willing to spare.
Matt and I met a year or so ago. We had lunch, which it was supposed to be about a half hour, 40-minute lunch. Ended up being an hour and a half of one of the best lunches I've ever had. So thank you for that.
It became an early dinner, if we want to be honest. Right?
There you go.
That's the way it worked.
Matt is a founder. He's a CMO. He's a consultant. He's an all-around great, smart guy, and we're lucky to have you here. I wanted to jump right in. You know, I know you wear many hats. If you look at Matt's LinkedIn profile, you have to scroll down several times to see his experience. He's been doing it all and done it all. And I want to talk about the New York Mets for sure, and I want to talk about the NBA for sure. I know that was way back when, but let's just jump in. How did it all start? Like, how did you get into this whole marketing thing? Where did it all begin?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I still, I've been doing this for decades, and I don't always think of myself as a marketer first. It's not what I grew up thinking about. I loved, but still love sports. And as I was growing up, I'm like, could I be a sports agent? Should I be a journalist? Can I be a coach? Probably can't be an athlete. So as I was working my way through, higher levels of undergraduate learning, I dabbled in journalism and became a writer for what was and probably still is one of the best college newspapers in the country. And I developed a voice and a passion for telling stories, but I still wasn't a marketer. And as I emerged into a professional space, the way I first broke in was, as you mentioned, with the New York Mets, but not in a marketing capacity and not even really in a journalism capacity, but as an intern working in the PR department for the inimitable Jay Horowitz, who is now retired, but a legend for anyone who knows sports or has been around the New York sports scene. Jay was the PR lead for the Mets for like 40 years.
Oh, yeah.
There were times I would come in and he was like sleeping in the office. He like literally lived and breathed his job. And he was a great role model. He's such a quirky yet brilliant guy. And I learned a lot from him as well.
Now, this is right out of college. You jumped into that?
Yeah, so I was an intern the summer before my senior year, and then after I graduated, I kind of stuck around for another season. And there are some stories. I was
listen. First, let me just say this: this is the dream, right? Like everybody wants to be a baseball player, football, whatever your sport's going to be. Growing up, that's what I'm going to be. Listen, I'll have a fallback job. I'll learn some sort of a trade, but I'm definitely going to be a professional baseball player. And then when that falters, your next gig is, all right, at the very least, I'm going to get some kind of a cool job in the front office or way to get on the field. You scored it, bro. Everybody wants that. You hit it.
I was very fortunate in that I was able to parlay some personal connections to getting the internship.
Nice.
But that doesn't always materialize into something. Like, we worked hard. Now, as an intern, that college summer, I wasn't getting paid in anything but like free hot dogs and exposure to Hall of Fame athletes, Mike Piazza, Ricky Henderson, all the opposing players that would come through. And my job really was to get in early, clip the newspaper articles from the game coverage from the night before, put them into a packet, photocopy them for every player and coach and front office staff. And that took like 6 hours. So it just like, imagine if we had AI and even just like digital back then. But by the time the game came around, I got to either work in the radio booth or occasionally I was sit in the score in the press box and be a liaison, but I occasionally got to be an official scorer as well. So again, great stories,
Jeez,
fun
that's
times,
awesome.
got to know players and athletes. But the great story that came away from this, which kind of catapulted a lot of different aspects of my career just from a learning experience, was that senior year of college. I went back, and before the season started, the Mets manager at the time, Bobby Valentine, came to speak at my
Oh
university.
my
And it
God.
was all off the record. And some people may remember this story. It's now got 25 years old. But he spoke off the record very candidly in a classroom, just like what it's like to be a manager, and was ripping some players. And a very good, well, a friend of mine, but a very big Mets fan, just went on a Mets message board innocently and was posting this. And this is the time when the internet was just starting to creep into existence. But the damage that the internet could do at the time became
Uh,
very real. And Bobby got in trouble. The front office found about it. They sent reporters, New York sports reporters, beat writers, came down and descended upon the campus looking for this student, again, a friend of mine. The Mets front office called me and asked me to get out in front of it. I was like, I'm a college student who's
I was going to say,
probably very
all 22
hungover.
years old, right? Yeah, not knowing anything.
Yeah. And I basically took one for the team with a little bit of coaching, but I don't think I handled it in retrospect as well as I could have. And all the papers were like, this guy, intern Matt Wurst, is clearly being dishonest or protecting something.
You clipped those out too? I would have saved those for sure, right?
I still have them here in a file cabinet. I actually wrote an essay about it for graduate school.
Oh my God.
A graduate school I ended up not even attending at the time. But that was like a formative, like holy you know what moment where the glare of the New York media was squarely on me and I was not ready.
Unbelievable. Remember those media guides that when we, back in the heyday of PIMS, used to be doing printing too as well. We used to print for NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball, those media guides, hotels and
I
restaurants.
have them up on my bookshelf right here.
It's probably worth
Every
something. Now they're
team.
collector item. Yes, every team. Unbelievable. Yeah. You probably got it from us.
Phoenix Suns.
We
probably.
They
would
probably
come.
Yeah.
They would come in boxes at the beginning of the year. Now, when I worked at the NBA, which was after my time at the Mets, building and helping to lead their digital and like sort of what Web 1.0 looked like, all the teams would send their media guides in like a bundle, and we get a box of all of them, and we would just leave it on our desk, and it became a reference. And then ultimately, yes, the internet took over. But for me, having those collections was really cool as a fan, but I didn't keep them year after year. I think I kept a handful. Like the team that won the championship that year, I might keep their media guide.
It's like the baseball cards of old, like if you had them now, right? Like, had I not thrown them out the bus window when I was graduating, you would have had them all right now.
You mean the ones I'm holding up right now? That
Totally, you and
see?
me both. I got them in a box
I still
somewhere.
got them. I work with, even now, a company called DAP Sports, which we can talk about later. But they are one of the next generation innovative leaders of collectibles, and they do live stream pack breaks where they're digging through and looking and opening.
I've seen those on reels. Unbelievable.
And yeah, I work with them now, and it kind of brings me back where it's why I went digging through my parents' basement, literally, and I now brought everything that was in my old childhood bedroom closet, and I have it here, and I probably need to get some of these things rated and graded and all the things that, like, it's become a business.
I've been promising myself for decades to do that. I got them, I got them in the plastic in that box, but years and years are going by. Now I'm telling my sons, when I'm gone, here's what I want you to do with those cards. Yeah, that old story. So you grew from, the days of handling that into the NBA as well. And you got into the whole marketing thing with the real focus being, this chief marketing officer of different companies and founding some companies. Well, talk a little bit about that. Like, how did that segue from the sort of that journalism print part of the world into this whole marketing gig?
Yeah, I spent a number of years at the NBA, as I mentioned, and really felt like I had a home there. And I learned so much about so many aspects of business, right? Very senior executives who are world-class marketers and experts in merchandising and even legal and all aspects and facets of business I was exposed to. And, I say I got my NBA instead of my MBA, which is, I say tongue in cheek, but I got the bug to go out and sort of build something, leveraging all the tools and skills that I had acquired over, really the first decade of this century, and helped co-launch the first real youth sports centric social media platform in 2008 called WePlay. And a bunch of athletes, Derek Jeter, LeBron James, were not only involved, but they were investors. So on one side, there was a utility piece, right? Scheduling practice and coordinating carpools and all the things that go into youth sports, scheduling and uploading photos. But also there was a content piece and a community piece. And I was responsible for building out the strategy and the content on that side of it. But what I very quickly realized, I was learning at the NBA and even before a lot of the basics of marketing, how you talk to audiences, how you get people connecting. And while I didn't have that marketing title, I was learning the ins and outs. And very quickly that company was acquired, and I found myself wondering, well, now what? And again, so maybe about 2 years into this, I was connecting with the lead of the agency that was working with my startup, that was doing CRM and some SEO work. And I was like, I don't know if you know this yet, but social media and communities are going to be a thing. And this is right when Facebook was kind of starting to take off, not yet as a marketing channel, but really just a community. So I said, let's try something. Give me, I don't know, 90 days, 3 months or 6 months, and let's see if we can go talk to your existing clients and sell them on marketing on social platforms. And that 3 to 6 month experiment at a company called 360i, which is now Dentsu, turned into basically a 10-year career redefining moment where not only did I learn marketing, but I grew up as sort of an entrepreneur, starting a practice and building processes and teams and management and leadership, but learning the ins and outs of an entirely new way of communicating and connecting brands with consumers that has turned into, after leaving that, building an agency in my own vision and becoming a CMO and a co-founder for ad tech companies and other community platforms ever since.
One of the best things about you, Matt, that I found fascinating is you definitely don't just talk the talk, right? Like you have these ideas, you have this fascination, you have this background, you have this strength, and you turn it into opportunities, right? A lot of people, I got a great idea. What we should do is this, or I thought of that 6 years ago, or you know what, my friend just started a company. Maybe I'll jump into that, and nobody pulls the trigger, right? Like you have a history of redefining who you are through what's sort of coming next, right? And we'll get into the whole open AI thing as that ties into it, but like it's fascinating to watch you as you find these companies. And I want to talk a little about Genuine and Chasm and Point Symmetry, right? Like you become the founder of these companies, which are really opportunities to take the next step in this world of communication that we're in. Tell me a little bit about them.
Well, I think what I've learned, again, this was not intentional or by design, but I've got this experience that has, in some cases, become an expertise in certain areas, but that mixed with curiosity, with experience, has really followed. I haven't really ever articulated it this way, but it's really thinking about like new content formats and leveraging platforms to build brands or drive conversion or create connection. But it requires an understanding of how to analyze data, right? There's a left brain component.
Yep.
And use the right tools, but also innovate with creativity and the right technology. So it's a little bit of left brain, it's a little bit of right brain in ways that I think many people like pick a path, and whether it's out of fear or just uncertainty, refuse to pick one side. I want to use my whole brain. And sometimes I get lucky. Look, there have been things that did not pan out that I thought might, but I like taking left brain solutions to right brain challenges and right brain solutions to left brain challenges, if you're following the symmetry and maybe the geometry of that. But yeah, like I also have a probably relentless, tireless work ethic. I think I've got an infectious enthusiasm that, like for my work, that becomes contagious. So people will maybe add me to their team or follow me onto my team because they want to see if we could make this thing into something.
It's a it's a infectious thing that you have where when you talk about these things, especially these things where, and I'm not too proud to say some of this stuff is over my head, right? But like you
Oh, me too, by the way. Don't worry about it.
I'm going to say this, you dumb it down in such a way that I get excited about this stuff. Like I wanted to ask you about the Genu AI that I saw mentioned on your site too, but I wanted
Yeah.
before we jump into that real
Okay.
quick. I know you mentioned communities earlier, and I also wanted you to tie in about the whole digital community and how, we're redefining retail. I want to get into all that too. So start me with the genuine AI.
Okay. So, you had mentioned point symmetry earlier, which is my LLC consultancy, but really just kind of my vehicle for driving into and sometimes parking and sometimes driving through and passing through different projects. And sometimes I bump into somebody or have an accident along the way or whatever vehicular metaphor you want to use. But, I've also been able to navigate my way into some really interesting things. Chasm and Mint were Web3 blockchain technology solutions platforms that had content and connection and community at the core. And that's why I stayed and continue to be involved, at least with Chasm. And Genuine is another one of those examples. But this is unique in that, meeting the founder a year plus ago and staying connected and getting more gradually involved until I got sucked all the way in. This is one of those rare instances where the platform and the technology is actually ahead of the marketing and the sales. Usually it's the opposite with startups.
Mm-hmm.
You got an idea, you got a vision, you got to sell it. You need to figure out who your target market is in your ICP or your ideal candidate profile, right? This is the opposite. This is like ready, and they just needed someone to kind of be the mouthpiece for it. And what Genuine is really we're giving brands and marketers and publishers a platform to create vertical video communities. So think TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube, the scrolling that everyone is doing and the amount of time they're spending. Those vertical videos are now vertical video based communities that we give to brands that can live within their owned and operated channels. So it still drives discovery, engagement, time on site, but it's a media monetization opportunity because if you're Walmart or Target or Lowe's and you want your partners, right, the consumer packaged goods being sold in these stores and online, to have a prominent place on your app or in your store, they spend money to do that. The problem is that inventory is limited. So now if you build a TikTok like scrolling application inside one of those companies' app, the time on site is 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Whereas
Yep.
previously it was 1 minute or 2 minutes.
Right.
But more than just a video scrolling solution, it's also a community. You can like, comment, share. It's creators and the influencers can get involved. So it's really become a multi-directional conversation that happens to also be monetizable and drive conversion. The AI piece of it is really interesting and in many ways was ahead of this entire AI hype cycle, but in a lot of ways doesn't need to be showy about it either. And that's why I am really interested and passionate about all of these things converging: community, content, technology, innovation, marketing. This AI, and I'm making air quotes for your listeners that they can't see, but it kind of sits at the center of all that. But the biggest challenge that AI has right now is a marketing and communication challenge because it can mean so many things to so many people. And there's so many different use cases and so many different audiences for how these use cases can come to life. There are different features and benefits. And we need to simplify that. And that is the job of a marketer.
Well said, of course. But, you touched upon something and it strung a bell in my head too, like the retail media networks and the blockchain that you mentioned, right? This is this community way of thinking, right? This is next level thinking, right? Because it wasn't too long ago that something like that was, not only not thought about, but if it was forbidden. Now it's almost a must, right? If you're going to compete. Maybe talk a little bit more in depth about that with the blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, innovation more broadly is one of those areas that is, different companies have different approaches, they have different budgets, they have different leaders. Innovation can come from anywhere and for any process and for any product. So it's thinking about the end user and what they need, but also knowing what is coming and what can provide something easier or faster or better or more creative or more entertaining, and figuring out how to make that happen. So it's like jumping to the end and figuring out then how to build the path to get there. Blockchain was and is a technology that I would just continue to be obsessed with. I learned about it probably a decade ago. There's a guy who sat outside my office. He was a UX designer at 360i, and he was like buying Bitcoin, and he would explain it to me. I was like, wait, so it's like,
what's a Bitcoin?
There's like no one owns it, and where does it live, and how does it work? And I was just really curious, but I kind of thought, these are some nerdy people who are talking about this stuff right now. But I got involved, and then I became one of those nerds. And it, even more so than just the hype cycle of blockchain, the technology itself is fascinating and still very early days. I wrote on a Post-it in 2018. I don't know if you could see this. We're talking on video as well as audio, but I'll explain it for the listener. I wrote, the path for blockchain. Number 1, affinity and collectibles, 2020 to 2023. And guess what? We were right on schedule.
Yeah.
Number 2 is loyalty, how you engage, and it's a CRM solution, 2023 to 2025. That happened a little bit earlier and kind of peaked maybe in 2023 and 24. But then the last one I wrote is identity. And that's where I think the final chapter, the long-term win, the success story for blockchain is going to be realized. It's how do we as individuals bring our identity online, but still own it. So you see that in California, the DMV is putting deeds and ownership licenses of cars onto the blockchain. And Visa is putting your credit card info onto the blockchain. And people are going to think, wow, that's not safe. That's not secure. Guess what? It's far safer and far more secure, and you own it. So that's where the education becomes really interesting. And the same thing is true with new media solutions like retail media networks that you talked about that have been around a while, but never really had a name or never really had, a market. And now you see big companies all being like, I need a retail network. And it's like United Airlines and Chase Bank and like all these companies that are not even retailers that have retail media networks. So it's about figuring out where the first nugget of potential is, figuring out use cases, learning from them as you test, figuring out the ways to tweak the message, refine the audience, and you're going in like this positive feedback loop where technology drives benefit and benefit feeds the next generation of technology.
It bites into the aspect of, especially with the retail media networks, that these retailers are in need of, starving for this first party shopper data, right? So how does that tie in? What's your perspective on that, right? Like, now let's talk a little bit about OpenAI and AR and ChatGPT. Like, how does data and analytics, by the way, side note, my son just graduated from high school. He's going to St. John Fisher up in Rochester.
Congratulations.
When we discussed what his major was going to be, and he wanted to, major in, I'll be a baseball player. And I was like, how about doing something in data and analytics? So I think it's, we're already here, but I think it's really exactly. So maybe
there's no reason why those two things can't coexist. In 8th grade, when I was in 8th grade, I wrote a math paper about multiple regression analysis being used by front offices to predict whether pitching or hitting was more valuable to a team. I was in 8th grade, by the way.
You're doing that in 8th grade. I was writing a report about the polar bears and, that they're
Well, I told you, I gravitate towards the nerdy things. Yeah, it still somehow overlaps with my passion.
Love it.
I got to present this in front of like college professors, and they're like, where did this kid come from? But you want to talk about how I got my start? Maybe we should go back further.
There you go.
Than just the internship to, presenting to the Hofstra University math team. Sorry, I interrupted you. What were you saying?
No, so I was
Son is into
asking.
data.
Yeah, so the whole data and analytics, like, so I was on a panel discussion not too long ago, where the topic was how AI is going to bring real time data and information to the warehousing world. Like part of what PIMS does, aside from customizable fulfillment and distribution, is we warehouse for clients, right? So saving time and space and the footprint, up until not too long ago was a manual process that you would measure and weigh, and that's how you came up with a price point. Now it's all being driven by aids like through AI, right, to determine the best way to house these items. How is chat GPT, AR, AI, all that good stuff that I don't know one microcosm of what you know about it, how is that going to help with the whole data and analytics world?
So I think, as you kind of bundled these things together, it's making me realize that we actually need to separate them in more specific ways to talk about the features, the use cases that each of them bring. Because AI as an umbrella topic can and will, and probably in many ways already is, being applied to so many different things, some of them behind the scenes that you'll never know about, some of them that are, like the B2B use cases. And, I joke that Genuine is a B2B to B to B to C company. So you think about what the features are that AI tools, and you mentioned one, which is ChatGPT, which is part of the AI suite, but Google and Adobe and Microsoft all have consumer-facing solutions as well as behind-the-scenes technologies for different businesses, marketers, operations people, right? So AI as an umbrella term means a lot of things to a lot of people and is providing very different solutions. Even, and you brought up Genu AI earlier, right? Genuine, my platform, was built using AI, but not in a way that you would necessarily automatically associate with like writing things for you. We talk about generative communities where you can create, set up, and manage communities tailored to user interests. We talk about automated moderation that is powered by an algorithm and machine learning, where if you upload brand guidelines and define community preferences and let Genu AI do the rest, I'm way more likely to trust over time, even though it's already better, an artificial intelligence tool that's like 99.87% accurate, as opposed to what used to be community managers and moderators that were humans, and maybe in some cases still are, but
right.
They're waking up on a Friday morning after being out late tonight partying with their friends, maybe a little hungover. Maybe their quality score is like 86.4%. So we're in this messy middle where, yes, we know the technology is better, but we need to educate and ultimately get people acclimated to all the use cases, creation, curation, automation of so many different systems. So AI has been around for a long time.
I know.
It's not like it's like, oh, all of a sudden it's new. Yes, the consumer-facing, let it write your son's papers for him in college application is relatively new, although I hope he's not.
Never.
I don't know. Maybe I use these tools every day, but I'm using them in ways to make my work better.
Yeah.
Whether it's ideas, suggestions, processes.
That's the great point too, right? Like better, faster versus in place of, right? We're speeding things up. We're helping get to market. We're helping with the supply chain. These things are becoming faster, quicker, better versus taking its place. And I think that's really
the feedback loop can happen faster too. So to your point, just to close the loop on analytics, the faster we can get from insights to strategy to planning to creative to production to measurement to learning again in this cyclical loop, that analytics is going to inform how we refine and reimagine the next phase of content or the next campaign or the next targeted media solution that is better optimized. It may not make the content better, by the way, at least not yet. I've been saying, like, yes, it's making things faster and smarter and more efficient, although I don't know that it's better yet, but if it gets the same result faster, that's a win.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you because I'm curious about your answer. So customization. I
was good at hitting, by the way. Fastballs, never great at the breaking.
I could see you crowding the plate a little bit, so I would throw that curveball inside a little bit. So
okay, all right.
Personalization and customization. That's the topic, right? So we work in the beauty space, we work in the apparel space, we work in the consumer goods space, automotive. We work in all different verticals, but they all have one big thing in common. They want to use us to create these customized, personalized sendouts, right? And what used to be a custom sendout was I would get a 2XL and you would get a large, and that's custom. You know what I mean? Now it's a completely different animal, including things like shade matching and timing and, logistics, and all that ties into it, which all that stuff can be supported through these means of AI that we were just talking about. But tell me about the importance of what you think the customization is as a marketing tool, like personalization, customization in 2024 and beyond. That's a big question.
It is a great question, and it's one that I vacillate on, and I'm going to be very honest, because I think in many ways we ran to the concept of personalization at scale as this shiny object or holy grail, but in a lot of cases, it's not even needed. So I think about a marketing and communication strategy that is a mix of broad, that's about awareness and discovery and branding and sort of higher level positioning. And then I think about how you customize and refine and optimize different messages for different audiences that are personalized. And I do think, AI can absolutely help with this. But at the same time, what is the right mix? And, so again, going back to the AI umbrella, there are a lot of different thoughts that when people are talking, or brands and marketers are talking to their different audiences, that they need to think about. There's authenticity and transparency, right? So companies need to be transparent about what their products do, what their solution is, but also what their AI does now. But then who's going to be seen as a thought leader in this space with AI? So that's just talking about AI. Now, when we talk about personalization, I actually think we're confusing and conflating the term personalization with contextual relevance. So that can be big and it can be very narrow, but I think this is really where AI can provide most immediate and maybe long-term impactful benefits. So if I'm a company that does anything, whether it's personalizing messaging or content or assets or swag or, a service, it doesn't matter. I want to highlight how, whether it's my platform, maybe I don't even need to talk about whether it's AI powered or not, but how does it create a better user experience? How do we make products that are more intuitive and tailored to individual needs while also not sacrificing, you can't create a custom die cast cut mold for every single person. It just doesn't work that way. So it's like sizes. Every single human being on the planet is a different size, right?
That's true.
But I might be a large and you might be a large, but the large is a little tight on me and it's big on you. But a medium's not going to work and an XL's not going to work for each of us. So this is where, you need to kind of create some parameters or buckets, or however you want to define these categories. When I think about, again, my platform has a really robust set of AI tools. Leverage AI in marketing efforts to create personalized ad experiences, utilize programmatic advertising and AI-driven customer insights to deliver messages at the right time in the right context. Sure, but let's not overthink it, but let's not underthink it either.
Well said. It reminds me of remember when the 3D printing first came out? That was going to end everything, right? Like you could do it on demand. The people are getting cars made out of it. You could do hearts and liver, kidney transplant. It was supposed to be the end all, right? And it found its spot. It found its niche, right? You're talking about platforms, made me think of a question I wanted to ask you about the platforms themselves. Looking at it from the marketing end of things, you have webcasts and podcasts and TikTok and Twitter and X and Facebook.
And that's just me personally, by the way, right? That's just all my channels
right.
that you're talking about there, because I'm everywhere.
We should have taped. Matt and I had a discussion a few weeks ago when we were setting this up about our children and being online and how different it is from. We're about the same age, so back in the day as opposed to now. So tell me about the platforms, like from a marketing. Now, take your parent hat off for a second, put on your CMO hat. What's the best bang for your buck if you're trying to get messaging out there nowadays? I know it's going to be a mix of both, but where do you put?
Yeah, it's Well, taking my parenting hat off is always hard because I feel like it's like stitched on there. Because everything I do, and more so than I probably ever thought, is still colored through that lens. I might be meeting with TikTok, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, "You're creating a mental health pandemic for our kids, right?" Like that's what's going through my mind.
Right,
Not to
right.
single them out because it's
Right,
not
of
just
course,
them,
of course
but
not.
that's timely and relevant. As a marketer, finding the right blend is so critical. And I talked about the different benefits and features that any company, including mine, offers. But I do think we're at a point where we are redefining digital architecture and strategy yet again. It happened at the turn of the century with internet and websites, but that was a very one directional set of messaging. You went there and you
Yep.
found what you
Yep.
needed and you left. Then search and social created more focused messaging and relevant conversations, but also the power of social proof should not be understated here either. Yes, big social is a walled garden and it's hard for brands and marketers to get data out of them and they don't own their content and there are a lot of reasons why they're not great, but they are the most effective and I think efficient advertising tools that have ever been created. So if we're talking about those platforms from a reach and a targeting perspective, I think the Instagram Meta Suite is amazing. I think YouTube and Google uh, targeting is beyond absurd when it comes to the tools and capabilities and even the analytics. But I think we need to stop thinking about them as destinations. We need to think about that as a pull solution as opposed to a push solution. What I mean by that is I don't think it's really very efficient or effective to just push content out if you're a brand or you're a marketer. I think you should be using content strategically to pull people back into your owned and operated ecosystem again. And yes, from a conversion perspective, that has always been true. And maybe it doesn't need to be as true now that you can actually buy and there are e-commerce solutions directly in TikTok and Instagram. But again, you don't own that data if you're a brand. You're not owning that community.
Yep.
You don't drive that conversation. So I think as far as an advertising and a marketing tool, I look at it at the different stages of it's no longer a funnel, it's actually an hourglass. So the top of the hourglass is funnel shaped, where it's awareness and interest and consideration and conversion. But once you're in, how do I keep you in instead of just like falling out the bottom? I want to reward with loyalty. I want to incentivize. I want you to connect and share and be an advocate. And that's where there are tools that are extremely powerful and effective, and more so than the social channels for delivering those objectives and those outcomes.
I couldn't have said it better if I tried, and I would not try because you've hit it spot on, right? There is one thing I wanted to ask you as you were going through it. It popped into my brain too. Is the more you talk about community, the more you talk about efficiencies in communication. You'll probably agree with me that the days of face to face, being a marketer means you're also in sales, you're a networker, you're responsible for the ROI, you're in charge of this, you run that. Everybody kind of it sways with the wind and depends on how much you need to lean on marketing. But what are your thoughts about events and face to face? Like, I think I remember during our lunch, you were talking me into, or you had just come back from, or you were going to, is it cons or cans? I always pronounce it wrong.
It depends on how French you want to pretend to be. I think the official pronunciation is can.
Can. And I know you're a big fan of South by Southwest and a bunch of other events. And give me a little feedback on the human connection and shaking hands and having a drink with somebody and a lunch and a dinner. Don't tell me those days are gone forever because I'll miss them terribly.
They are not gone. I love them. But again, I think the pendulum swung maybe a little too far in the direction of you could be at an event every week and you could actually get value out of an event that is being hosted. But these events are all very different in terms of the content, the programming, as well as the networking opportunities. So if you're more sales or marketing focused, certain things may be better than others. If you're there to learn, it might be different. But finding that right balance for you is important, and know that different people who go to these events are there for different things. I might be in sales or marketing and want to attend an event where my like the 5 people I know I need to get are going to be at, those people may not be going to those events to actually talk to you as a seller. Right. They're there to learn from their peers. And you got to be mindful and respectful of that. But in a networking environment, like that to me that is my fuel. That is where I derive energy and where I hope I give back something of value to. I have a podcast. I think everyone does. Yours is great, but there are some that aren't as great.
Yeah.
My podcast was actually born out of an idea that I wanted to go to events and talk to people and record conversations with the people that I spend time with. Because I have like conference friends, people that I've met over the years that I consider to be some of my closest personal and professional connections that like my wife has like no idea they exist. And that's not nefarious. I'm not doing anything.
Totally.
If you're listening, honey, I promise nothing bad is happening. But like that to me is the most fun. It's like, again, it's like an energy, and you have to bring energy if you want to take something away. And some people don't bring anything, and they're there to just suck the life out of the room. And there are other people who are just pure givers. And yeah, Cannes is amazing because it's in this exotic location, but it's become a place where the decision makers in creative and technology and media and entrepreneurs and like they all come together, and your senses are heightened. So your receptivity and your generosity are both at peaks. And I think South by is another one of those. But you also got to be careful because some of those have become over commercialized. You could get lost at some of these events if you don't plan and you don't have the right guides or network to help keep you within the rails, right? You could easily just go on a bender for 4 days and add no value and take nothing home. But
I felt that way with CES. I always wanted to go to CES. I hadn't gone to CES. I think I might have gone years ago, but I wanted to go back. It was right after the pandemic, and it was an airplane hangar full of people that were just dying for anyone to come over and talk to them. But like, I didn't get as much out of it because maybe I didn't put as much into it as I should have. But it was one of those things.
Knowing that in those, right, you think about the division of, or the classification and taxonomy of events, you've got smaller, more focused, I would call them niche industry events where maybe everyone goes to a resort and it's 200 people and you're trapped, right? So to me, that's really interesting because you'll get to know everyone and you maybe know who some of the key people going in advance are and you know what the programming is. And after 2 or 3 days, you've exhausted it and you've taken advantage of the dinners and the networking sessions and you've learned something from some panelists and you keep in touch with a few people. That's on one end. Then you've got CES or, you know, the DeMexco, which happens in September or October, or Advertising Week in our industry, or Cannes, and it's like everything is spread out, and you could literally spend the entire week on a bench on the side of the road and see everyone you need to, and never attend a panel, never attend a dinner.
It's
or
so
you
true.
Could just go to private VIP event. Like they're so different. So you have to find the right mix. But at the end of the day, the reason you're going to these things is to accomplish business, whatever that means to you.
Need to get the ROI on that event, that cost. You know that.
How many leads did you get if you're a salesperson? How many people did you speak to? Were you on a panel? Did you
so true.
Get someone's phone number? It's like dating. You could go to a club and hope to bump into someone that you'll meet and spend the rest of your life with, or you could try online dating, or you could go to like a small planned event. Like there's so many different ways that
perfect analogy. Your
question
ears
is
were...
how do you get them to call you back?
No
matter what,
totally.
whether you're dating or it's in business.
Your ears were probably ringing last night because I was telling that same son who's going away to college, I was telling him I was going to be talking to you today, and I had read, I don't know where I found it. It was something you had posted way back of this story about Derek Jeter, that you had met Derek Jeter, and he taught you a very, very valuable lesson about mentoring and the significance of, who was chosen as captain. Can you share that story? Because it's a really cool one.
Yeah, I'm not a Yankees fan, so it's an interesting turn here in the conversation. However, that company, that startup that I was talking about earlier, WePlay, Derek was not only an investor, but an active member of this community as a mentor to all of the kids. And I'll admit it now that it's almost 2 decades later, but I ghost wrote his blog. And this was like
Awesome.
early days of blogging. So I would
Awesome.
I would either talk to him on the phone or I'd go to the stadium and spend time with him
Has
and
this
ask
guy had a
questions. And
gifted life? It's wonderful. Go ahead. Sorry.
well, I mean, look, certain athletes are more forthcoming in giving than others.
Yeah.
This was definitely a professional relationship. We never got to hang out off the field or outside of these.
I would
This
love
is
to
like
hear
I
those
have
stories if they happen, right? Yeah.
not with Jeter. I've done that with some other
Yeah.
athletes.
Yeah.
We'll say I think it's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
But as I got to experience getting to know him and his work ethic and his sense of responsibility, as well as just the way he interacted with and connected with little leaguers and kids and even their families, that message, that responsibility that he had was not lost on me. And I had never at that time been someone who was responsible for another human being. I was not yet a manager. I was not yet a parent. But whether you're a captain, a manager, a leader, or a parent, there are certain responsibilities that come along with it. And it means putting others first. And I always like to joke that, Derek Jeter is a great player. He was a great leader, but he was never the best at any of those of his generation. And that was maybe the Mets fan in me being a little jealous that we never had a player like that. I don't know. But as I've grown and experienced all of those responsibilities, not ever having to hit, in the clutch in the postseason is a different set of responsibilities. But parenting has some moments where you got to
Yeah.
step up and perform under pressure. And I think the more I thought about him and the time I spent with him, I really respected him more and more, and I obviously lost touch with him. But I am grateful for the experiences that I had watching him interact with kids or, people with special needs or even just his teammates. Like being in the locker room and watching people like, oh, he's quiet. You know what? Derek Jeter was a leader.
Yeah.
And that is just a really powerful takeaway, that when I think about management and leadership as two different functions with overlapping responsibilities, I think about that a lot. How can I be better at both of those in any given circumstance?
That's why I asked you to share that story. Since I read that, I was doing a little research on you a week or so ago, and I read that, and it's kind of resonated with me a little bit. That's why I shared it with him. That's why I asked you to share it with everybody else. Matt, as we close down here, I'm preparing the lightning round. I'm going to tell you about that in
You
a
guys
second.
do that too? I told you at my podcast we have a lightning round. And
Do
it's
you?
the one thing we do. We call it's called Gone in 60 Seconds. You're supposed to answer 6 questions in 60 seconds. In my podcast, we've had I don't know how many guests. No one's ever come in under 3 minutes. So it's more like the enlightening round as opposed to an actual lightning
Matt's
round. I will do my
podcast.
best.
Matt's podcast is called the Snarketing Podcast. Check it out. It's definitely worth a listen. But while I get this ready, just for the young listeners, my son's friends that are off to college that want to be founders, they want to be CMOs, they want to make $100 bazillion. What advice would you give them as they start off in this journey?
Anytime someone asks me that, I think of Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School, right? When he's giving the commencement address and it's like, what advice would you give to the graduates? And he's like, don't go, stay at home, live off your parents.
So true.
But that is not the advice I'm going to give. I wasn't really as prepared for this, but one thing that I think about all the time as just a professional who's been in this industry a long time is don't specialize until or unless you have to. I really thrive and think that my success is rooted in this idea of the generalist mentality. You have to acquire different skills over time, hard skills, soft skills, but you're expanding them. You're not just like improving one refined thing over and over again. That may work for certain people, but for me, I think you should add to and expand. Like, don't stay in one lane unless you're driving. Then yes, stay in one lane. But challenge yourself, expand your expertise and your experiences, because over time, the more tools you have in your belt, you really do become like Batman. Batman did everything.
You had
He
all
wasn't
those
just
tools,
like a
right?
one-trick
Yeah.
pony.
Yeah.
So
Great advice,
be a
man.
Batman. You don't have to be a Superman.
Great advice. Okay, Matthew Wurst, here we go. These are this or that type questions. Whatever pops into your mind. If you want to give one quick line of reasoning, that's fine. If you want to just leave it at the answer, that's totally up to you.
Do I have time to put the questions into ChatGPT as you're asking them?
I may have gotten some of these from ChatGPT, so here we go.
Then it knows the answers anyway.
Matt, brand building or performance marketing?
I have to choose one.
You have to choose one.
I'm going to say brand building. It will feed performance if done right.
Attaboy. User-generated content or professional content?
I'm going to go with professional content right now. I think there's such a saturation of user-generated content that even though it is more impactful on a one-to-one basis, professionally generated content just actually, I think, is more viable as a marketer.
I saw something you had written once about is everybody their own retailer now? And that just came to mind when I wrote this one down. Retailer partnerships or direct to consumer?
It depends on what your objectives are and what your company... I know, everything is a depends. But if I stall any longer, I'll be wearing depends. So I will tell you that I think we are in the midst of a D2C second renaissance. The first one was amazing. It kind of had a dip. I think we're coming back.
Two more. Influencer partnerships or brand ambassadors?
I like brand ambassadors because everyone is trying to be an influencer, but very few can actually succeed at it, unless, again, we're talking one-to-one. But brand ambassadors can create different types of outputs that drive different types of outcomes that can be leveraged on different platforms and in different ways. So I think you actually get more long-term bang for your buck with ambassadors, and influencers just really seem like more fleeting flashes in the pan.
Last one. What's more preferable to you? Is short-term campaigns or long-term community building?
Oh, if you've been listening to the last 3 hours of this conversation unedited, right? We're in hour 4 of this now. Edited for time. Great job, editors. Shout out to you guys. I mean, I am a community builder. That is like, that'll be written on my tombstone in anywhere from 1 to 75 years.
Matt Wurst, this has been wonderful. I knew it was going to be wonderful. I appreciate all the feedback. I love the answers. You did fabulous. I knew you would. I thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your time.
Mike, it's always a pleasure to spend as many minutes with you as possible, and I look forward to... When are we doing next season? Should I come back?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Have your people call my people. I don't have people. All right.